Welcome to this afternoon's virtual fundraising reception here in California's beautiful 4th District. My name is Todd Stenhouse. I'm an advisor to the woman on your screen who will be the next Congresswoman from California's 4th District. We're coming to you live from here in California's beautiful 4th District. For those of you who don't know or who are new to our community, this is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. We include Lake Tahoe, we include Yosemite, we include so much of California's watershed, farmland, small business community, and more. And we're here this afternoon to talk about this campaign, this district, and a new generation of leadership. For the last 12 years, California's 4th has been represented by a guy named Tom McClintock. Mr. McClintock is the 5th most partisan member of the United States Congress. And if you're scoring at home, there are 435 members of Congress. So that puts him on a pretty extreme scale. And the people of California's 4th District, like people across our country, are certainly sick and tired of the divisiveness, of the polarization that is ripping this country apart. And it is a special kind of leader, a new generation of leader that is emerging in these extraordinarily challenging times. It goes without saying that we're doing this virtually. Obviously, we are living through very, very challenging times. And I want to thank all of you again for joining us. A couple housekeeping items before I introduce the next Congresswoman from the 4th, which is that in your chat box on your Zoom screen, you're going to find a bunch of information about this campaign. First and foremost, you'll find out how to follow Brynne on Facebook, how to follow her on Twitter, how to contribute to the campaign. After all, this is ultimately an effort to bring about the change we need, not just here in the 4th District, but across our country. And as I said at the outset, few people embody that change, that new generation of leadership we need better than our first guest here this afternoon. Brynne is an extraordinary story of the American dream, to put it mildly. Somebody who was a competitive gymnast growing up, the daughter of a military veteran, first in his family to go to college, and a mom who runs a small town store. Brynne is a graduate of Yale University and the London Business School. She has worked around the world, helping to finance infrastructure and housing projects before starting her own business from scratch. One of the first women to build and run a global technology company. Brynne actually I like to say she was built for this moment because her expertise comes in the field of a changing economy and how we help more people access jobs and compete in a changing economy, and an economy where oftentimes we're meeting in remote locations such as this. This is an extraordinary election year and an extraordinary opportunity here in California's 4th District. Brynne is the kind of reformer, the kind of leader who understands that to move forward, we have to bring people together. We have to unite and build a future that includes all of us. And so with that, I want to introduce the next Congresswoman from the 4th Congressional District, my community, a place I'm proud to live in. I want to welcome Brynne Kennedy to the line. Brynne, take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much, Todd, and thank you so much to all of you who have joined us this evening. I am Brynne Kennedy, and I am your next Congresswoman from California's 4th District. I live in Roseville, which is the largest city and fastest growing part of our district. It's part of the greater Sacramento suburban area. And I come to running for office from a career in the private sector as a businesswoman. And I like to say that I'm not from the world of politics. I am from the real world, like all of you. I have walked in your shoes. I know how difficult it is to run a business in California. I know what it's like to wake up every day, go into work, earn a paycheck, invest for your future. And unlike my opponent, Tom McClintock, I know what it is like and how to work with people with diverse perspectives to find the best solution to problems. And that's actually why I decided to run for Congress. I did some policy work in my business career, and candidly, I was just horrified by how far apart we are in our Congress, by how polarized, how much fighting, how much people put political party over the people that they represent. And I thought, gosh, if I ever did my job like this as a business leader, I would be fired pretty darn quick. And I think many of you probably would be as well. You know, if I said things like, I don't really like those people on the other side of the table, so I'm just not going to talk to them. Or if I said things like, well, this year it was really hard, so I got nothing done for my constituents. Or if I said things like, you know, those people who elect me, who I work for, they ask really hard questions, so I'm just going to stop talking to them. And I felt we should hold our government leaders to a higher standard than our business leaders. And we need to restore that faith in Congress, in our nation. And to do that, I believe we need a new generation of people like myself that will stand up, have the courage to listen to everyone, to seek common ground, and to fight for progress, not continue polarization. That's who I am, and that's the kind of Congresswoman that I will be. Now, as Todd mentioned, I came to being where I am today from an upbringing in rural Western Massachusetts. It was an area that in many ways is very, very similar to our congressional district. I lived there till I was 18, and then I decided to make my life here in our district for the reason that the lifestyle was very similar. It was an area where when I was a kid, I saw a lot of jobs leave our area, factories close, and a different generation of politicians forget parts of our country outside of cities. I sat around a dinner table with a conservative mother and a liberal father, listening to both of their views and seeking to find the common ground. And actually, I even wrote my college essay about this. It was called Political Heat with Dinner Time Meat. And I grew up as a national gymnast, training about 30 hours a week and competing across the country until an injury sent me to college instead of with my Olympic dream. But that taught me that with tenacity and hard work, you can do anything. That's what I brought to my business career and what I will bring to Congress. Now, those weren't the only experiences I had growing up that formed a lot of my worldview. I also had both of my parents get sick with cancer. My dad, who was the first in his family to go to college, a military veteran, and a community college teacher, had good benefits from his contract. So he never had to worry about his care, just his illness. And sadly, he did not make it. But my mother, who has spent 48 years building up a store on a main street, could never afford health care for her or her employees, like so many small business owners. And after their divorce and after she got sick, I learned with her through her illness about the complex, broken, and cripplingly expensive healthcare system that we all face today. That is why healthcare, fighting for your healthcare, to increase choice, to lower costs, and to preserve protections for pre-existing conditions is personal to me. And I will always be working to make sure that you have the care that you need, especially during this pandemic. Now, after college, as Todd mentioned, I actually learned Mandarin in college, and I went off and worked all over the world doing real estate and infrastructure investing. And then I built a human resources software company from California, which I grew from an idea to a large global business. And through those experiences, I learned about both our allies and our adversaries as I lived and worked around the world in places like China, India, and the UK. I also saw what good business looks like. I saw businesses that were forces for good, that uplifted workers into the middle class and paid well and gave good benefits. I also saw what bad business looks like. I saw people who put profits over their workers. And I saw how tragic that is. And finally, personally, I felt what it was like to be treated differently because I was a woman operating in a man's world, to be paid differently, to be talked about differently, and to be violently assaulted by a boss. Now, I know what it is like for so many people across our country today. And that is why the promise of my campaign is that I will work every day to make sure that everyone, regardless of what you look like or who you love or what gender you are, can work hard in our country and do well. Invest for your future, buy a home, buy a nice painting for your wall, go on a vacation, and live safely in our community and our country. My opponent, Tom McClintock, has voted repeatedly to remove your health care. He's voted against basic protections for employment, and he continually votes against that principle that everyone should be able to work hard, do well, and live safely. Now, my campaign is being run at a time where we have a lot of challenges. Tom McClintock is working to actively undermine a safe reopening from COVID. I have a plan to balance public health and open our economy by investing in our infrastructure, supporting our small businesses, and bringing innovators to our area to create new jobs. I will defend your healthcare and your protections from pre-existing conditions, and I have a plan to add a Medicare option to the exchanges to provide more choice and flexibility. Tom McClintock has voted more than 20 times to destroy your healthcare. I will defend the Medicare and Social Security that you have earned through years of hard work. Tom McClintock has spent decades trying to destroy your Medicare and Social Security, which you have rightfully earned in your career. And finally, I will stand up to special interest corruption because I'm an outsider to politics. I will stand up to Tom McClintock's corporate PACs. He funds his campaign with dark money and special interests. I support my campaign with donations from all of you, the good people of our district. And I will work to overturn Citizens United, the worst Supreme Court decision in recent memory. Those are the reasons that I'm so happy today to be joined by former South Bend, Indiana mayor, former presidential candidate, Afghanistan war veteran, Pete Buttigieg, a man who has continually put unity ahead of division, a man who shares with me the view that a new generation with the courage to serve our nation, to serve everyone, is how we will move forward. And a man who has continually put public service to our nation above any kind of party politics. With that, I am very pleased today to introduce Mayor and former presidential candidate, Pete Buttigieg. Over to you, Pete. I think you're on mute, Pete.
You'd think with 100 of these we do a month, we'd be masters of it now. But thanks for the chance to join you, and thanks for stepping up to run and help us flip such an important seat. And I appreciate a chance to be with folks this evening and drop by just to talk about how important it is to take the House and knowing the natural beauty of your district. I'm sincerely sorry that I'm not campaigning in person, but hopefully we get a chance to do that sometime. I really appreciate your stepping up, especially knowing that, in our House majority right now, which is, if you think about it, really the only thing that is standing in the way of even worse outcomes in Washington at a moment like this. It's going to be so important to add voices who speak for districts that maybe aren't considered to be the kind of tribal fortifications of democratic and progressive politics, more suburban and rural areas that, for all kinds of reasons, should be voting for Democrats if we have the right vocabulary and invite people to come our way. And I know you're doing that work right now, competing against a member of Congress who is so out of step with the actual needs of those he represents, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about democracy itself and the difference between initiatives like HR1 and what you've talked about in terms of dealing with money in politics and where he stands. It reminds me a lot of my own district, where I think right now I just don't feel well represented in Congress, and I know that so many of your constituents in your district in California feel the same way. Look, this is a moment where you just look at the news, you look at where we are, and here we are at the midpoint of the year. Think about what that means. That means the impeachment of the president, the entirety of the resolution of the Democratic presidential nominating contest, the arrival of the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, and the national outpouring of anguish over racial injustice, not to mention the scandals over this president's engagement with China and Russia. All of that just came in the first half of this year, which means the second half of this year is probably also going to throw world historical challenges our way. In order to meet that moment, we need to make sure that we are campaigning in every district, that we leave no voter with any confusion over where we stand, and that we're supporting campaigns like yours. So I appreciate the chance to drop in, and I'm so glad that you stepped up to help retake this seat and strengthen our House majority.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks for being here. It's interesting because I think South Bend, Indiana is in many ways has more in common than our area than some places in California, like LA, for example. The country's gotten so divided, it's so polarized, and I know you and I both share a commitment to putting unity first. I'm just curious, what do you think that we can all do together to move past this moment of deep division and deep polarization?
I've always believed that politics fundamentally is about everyday life, and our political decisions are about how people's lives can be made easier. And I felt in my own life, and certainly my family's life, on everything from healthcare to my ability to wear this wedding ring, how the decisions that are made in big white buildings in Washington are incredibly personal for all of us. I also think that presents an opportunity to reach across in areas that may be in the habit of voting for the other side, but are more than ever ready to listen to other voices. We're seeing it in the numbers. We're seeing it we saw it in Iowa, where so many counties, our specialty actually was winning in counties that had voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump, where people are now saying, okay, this doesn't speak to me. I want to know how we're actually going to get problem solved and get things done. And I know that's the spirit that you're bringing to this campaign too. And at the end of the day, people are with us on all of the critical issues around expanding access to healthcare, raising wages, empowering workers, preserving rights. Issue after issue, when we come down to it, most people are with us. We just don't see that reflected in what's going on in Washington right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get pushed into these false choices of polarized extremes, and most people are with us in the middle with pragmatic progress around issues like healthcare and jobs and infrastructure. One of the things I really admired about your presidential campaign was your focus on small towns and suburbs, places very often left behind in the past by our economy. Now, as you watch COVID and this economic downturn play out and potentially get worse, what are some of the key steps that you think we need to take for all of America to recover?
Well, I think the first thing we got to recognize is that recovery isn't about going back to where we were before. right? The old normal revealed so many of the weaknesses that have led to this moment we're in right now. And it's a moment of reckoning around the weaknesses and the fissures in everything from lack of healthcare to lack of protections that compelled some people to go to work and become sick when they lack things like sick leave. So this isn't about returning to where we used to be with the same winners and losers and the same weaknesses. This is about building a resilient future where everyone can thrive. And that goes beyond healthcare. That's structuring an economy that empowers everyone to thrive. That's ensuring that we live on terms that allow us to meet future challenges, which we know are coming our way, in everything from the future of health security and cybersecurity to the future of climate, which is clearly going to be a defining challenge for the generations that are coming of age now and those to come. All of this requires that we bring everything that we have by way of imagination, as well as resolution for problem solving to a moment like this. And I know that's what you can contribute for the district, but also in the national conversation from Congress too. Matter of fact, I believe you have a deep background in some of the issues that are now suddenly the order of the day. I'd love to know a little more about. You literally wrote the book, right, on different means of working. What's it like to see some of the things that you discussed before the rest of us were plunged here into the Zoomosphere? And how do you think about that? How does it inform your approach and your policy vision?
Yeah, well, it's rather ironic. I spent about 10 years building a human resources software company and a business that was very distributed. So a lot of the work we did was around mobile and distributed teams, which now we're running a campaign like that, virtually and distributed, and the whole world has been thrusted into this Zoom world. Running a campaign's been good. I mean, we have done a lot of Zoom as we're doing now. We've convened teletown halls with public health experts, local electeds, had tens of thousands of people able to join. In many ways, we're able to reach out to more people more regularly as everyone's gotten familiar with digital work across our district. And I think it's a really good dry run for some of the disruptions that we'll continue to see in our economy going forward. And I think as we do come back, we will see greater flexibility in work, greater distribution of teams. And I think that's really exciting for areas like mine and for South Bend and other parts of the country that might not have traditionally been sort of an urban core, but now you have this opportunity to start businesses or work remotely or work in a more flexible way and, live in your community and then create more jobs in the community, spending money at small businesses. I'm really, really excited about that. And also excited about then working to make sure we have the infrastructure, foundation, the broadband, the equal access to connectivity to make the distributed work, education, telehealth a reality for the future.
Sure, we're all experiencing.
I'm also really glad you mentioned sick leave in your comments, because my opponent, McClintock, was the only person from California to vote against COVID relief. And he actually said he voted against it because he thought people were going to game the system, his words, to get free time off of work with their sick leave. So you can tell how different we are with our perspectives on the dignity of work that people bring. And it could only be said by someone who's never worked a day in the private sector and doesn't appreciate that dignity of work.
Speaking of the private sector, I'm curious how you decided to make a transition. It's not I remember when I left the kind of the warm embrace of my employer to go out and run for what in my case turned out to be a very uphill race in Indiana. But a lot of people looked at me funny when I told them I was stepping away. How did you make the decision from your successful private sector background to leap into public service like this, especially at such a demanding time?
Well, we probably share the fact that everyone looks at you like you have 5 heads and says, why would you ever want to do that? It's the most common question. For me, as probably for you, it's not like you wake up one day and all of a sudden say, I'm going to change my life. For me, it was an evolution. A lot of my family had a commitment to service, served in the military. So I was very much raised with that perspective. I did well, but I went through a lot of things, parents being sick, treated differently as a woman in business that I don't want other people to go through. I want them to live the American dream a little bit easier than I did. And then the catalyst for me was doing some policy work as a group of business leaders in Sacramento and Washington. And candidly, I was horrified by just how polarized and detached so many of our representatives are. And I remember I just kept thinking, my God, if I ever did my job like this, focused on fighting instead of results, I would be fired really quick by my board. And so why do we accept this? And I remember I kept talking about it with people like, this is crazy. Why do we accept this in Washington and we don't accept this in our own jobs? And finally, I just thought, God, I could keep talking about it, or I could be a part of the change that I want to see. And so many other people told me they want to see. You know, I have a belief that if your sports team is failing, the first thing you do is you recruit new players. And I don't think there's too many people that would say that Congress is a high-performing organization that is winning right now. So my belief is we need a new generation there to get things done again.
Well said.
I had a question for you, Pete. As the daughter and granddaughter of military veterans, and as the next Congresswoman of a district that has a very, very high percentage of veterans, in fact, the highest percentage in California, I was hoping you could weigh in on what you see to sort of the 21st century solutions and offerings we need to preserve our national security and support our veterans and their families.
Yeah, it's so important. I know it's important to your district, and it's important to me personally. And we're in a moment where we've got to do a better job as a country. We know that of looking after veterans of all generations, supporting military families at a time like this. And there are a lot of concrete things we could do. Everything from things that sound very technical but really matter, like the ability to for a military spouse who has to step away from studies due to a relocation to be able to get student loan relief. All the way through to the broadest questions of how we're funding on-base housing and making sure that military families are safe. But the biggest thing is to make sure that our military can count on its leadership. And that is unfortunately not something we have right now. Up until now, I always believed no matter who the president was, no matter their party, no matter whether you agreed or disagreed with them, you could at least depend on them at the top of the chain of command to act with the best interests of troops at heart. And one of the reasons this news from Russia, at a time when I thought that we were beyond being shocked and beyond being any further outraged than we already were, really is still more shocking and still more outrageous. I've been hearing from friends that I was in Afghanistan with, who I don't think of as very political, just saying, what is going on here? And, the reality is we already know what to expect from this White House. But the question is, do we have members of Congress who put principle first, who aren't so trapped in loyalty to party that they're unwilling to ask tough questions or stand up for priorities that should be important to people of any party, like ensuring that we're protecting the safety of those we ask to serve? And it's all the more reason why we need the right kind of congressional oversight, as well as the right kind of leadership in the Oval Office. And there's, I think, no matter what party you belong to, no matter who you vote for president, you should want to make sure that we've got members of Congress who, like you, have the perspective of military families at heart, are aware of the duty that we have to veterans, and would never allow there to be any action that is to the disadvantage of the people who put their lives on the line for this country.
Yeah, the fact that my opponent has said nothing about the developing news story is everything that is wrong with our politics, putting party above patriotism. Well, Pete, I know that we've just got one more minute with you. You had a lot of supporters here in our district. I know many people were excited to see you today. Do you have any closing words for the people that have joined us today?
Well, again, I want to thank you for stepping up for this race and helping to make sure that this district changes hands, because it's long overdue. And I want to thank everybody who's part of this, because I know that you're being tapped in all kinds of ways. Campaigning has changed, and in many ways it's changed most of all for volunteers and supporters. Candidates are, of course, still fundraising and weighing in on policy and talking to advocates and engaging the media, and they just have to do it in a different way. But everybody else, those of us who are not on the ballot, we have to find new ways to be supportive of those who are. And I know I'm preaching to the choir if you're on this Zoom call, but it's so important to reach out to people especially people who maybe are on the fence about whether to get involved or whether this race matters, because it absolutely does, and it's so important that we succeed here. We are the answer to the question of what campaigning will look like now that it's been transformed by events. And this is there was never a time to sit on the sidelines in American politics, but this is a moment where I think for the rest of our lives we'll be looking back on where we were. So I'll be watching your race closely. I'll be excited for good news come November, and to celebrate what you've been able to do to really put country over party and call people toward a better future. And I want to thank everybody who's part of this event and part of your campaign.
Thank you so much for joining us, Pete.
Sure thing. It's a pleasure. Take care.
Thank you, Mayor Pete, and thank you, Brynne. Folks still on the line, I want you to know we're going to spend a few minutes